The White House described President Trump's conversation with Volodymyr Zelenskyy yesterday as, quote, fantastic. But there are still a number of differences between Washington, Moscow, and Kyiv following Trump's calls this week. Just moments ago, Zelenskyy gave a press conference in Norway where he was asked about the American proposals. Let's watch coverage from the BBC.
We want to end the war. So who will argue with that? Let's then make certain steps faster. And during the meeting in Jeddah, American party made a leap forward, rapid step forward, and they said, let's speak not about the partial ceasefire, but about the full ceasefire. We reacted immediately right at that meeting. We reacted. My team reached out to me because that was the change of agenda with which they arrived there. And I said immediately, we approve. We confirm we want to move to the end of the war. Yes. And everybody was very happy. And
I want to bring in Nina Khrushcheva. She is a professor at the Julien J. Studley Graduate Program of International Affairs at the New School, and she also happens to be the great-granddaughter of former leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor, as always.
Thank you.
So political leaders can say all they want, but these negotiations will be handled by technical teams to work through the details. How difficult of a challenge will that be?
Well, we're already seeing that it's a very difficult challenge because Donald Trump seems to be mediator between Vladimir Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin. And so far it's going slow. Somebody agrees on something and somebody else doesn't agree. So now they have technical teams. Technical teams can decide on certain articles of those agreements, but then these articles of those agreements still go back to the top guys, and the top guys may still say, well, but why didn't you consider this and something else? And so far it's going slower, and even if the ceasefire seems to be closer to what it was, say, 2 weeks ago, it's still far away from being closed. And also, we do know that both sides keep shooting at each other, never mind that they already agreed that that at least the infrastructure, the electric and gas and other crucial infrastructure should be part of the ceasefire. So far, we're still in the process of moving, but the end is no, at least the way it looks today. We really do not know when the ceasefire, and if it does, when it does come.
So certainly President Trump should be applauded for at least getting these two leaders to the negotiating table, to at least getting to a point where there is communication between Moscow and Washington, and there is some movement. But I wonder, when I hear partial ceasefire, then I see what Vladimir Putin is demanding, which is essentially that the United States stop supplying arms to Ukraine, that Ukraine stand down its military, that they do not entertain ever the idea of entering NATO. Then I wonder to myself, well, what is Vladimir Putin giving up? What's your analysis of it?
Vladimir Putin is giving up not going further, potentially. And I think that NATO membership is kind of a really interesting question here, because behind the closed doors, NATO member countries almost all agree that Ukraine potentially would never become part of NATO. I mean, we don't know, because who knows what's going to happen in 20, 50, whatever, 100 years. But so far, they all agree on that. And yet there's sort of a story that, no, Ukraine needs to decide. So that hypocrisy, in fact, does help Putin, because he says, well, you're hypocrites. Why are you then pushing? So it means that you're pushing for the war. So that's basically a no-starter. For Putin to give up, he can, and he already says that. He said it a couple of months ago, is that, for example, the two are the very main cities that the Russians want to get. It's Odessa and Kharkiv. These are the cities that now under the control of Ukraine and should stay, though. So Putin is basically saying, I am staying with wherever we have today, but then what we have to discuss is that Odessa and Kharkiv are not going to be part of kind of Russian advances. So he thinks he gives quite a lot. That is, he can continue to go further. It's going to be a long war, a war of attrition, which Russia is likely to win because Ukraine doesn't have the power unless Europe gets into that war completely. Or he would say, well, now and Ukraine gets what is left of Ukraine, is not going to become NATO, and that's your decision to make. So he thinks he's in quite strong position to make this demand that, of course, for Ukrainians seem like an improbable proposition.
So, all right, Professor. So let's look at it from that standpoint, which is that the Ukrainians, despite consternations, will have to agree that whatever territory was lost during Putin's incursion and invasion is lost forever, at least as long as Vladimir Putin is the leader of Russia. And so the only question then would be, what would prevent, and if Vladimir Putin agrees to it, but what would then prevent Putin from doing this again, and maybe not to Ukraine, but to another country on his flank? That's, I think, the biggest question for just those of us here in the United States, and I'm sure Europe as well. Fine, Ukraine has to, sort of suck it up and agree that those territories are gone. But what guarantees do they and other Eastern European states have that Vladimir Putin won't do this again, given that he will have won what territory that he took, which was during an illegal war?
That's a fantastic question, which we do not have an answer to. I am almost certain that Vladimir Putin doesn't have an answer to it, because he would say for now that, okay, fine, we technically won this war. I got as far as I could have gotten, and I'm going to stop. It is a question that nobody has an answer, and maybe, as I said, maybe even himself, because it will depend on further developments of diplomatic or any other relations, is that, what if in a year he would say, well, Moldova doesn't sit well, so I think I'm just going to go and make sure that Romania is not taking Moldova over, or something like that. But this question is very important, but since nobody has an answer to it, it should not really prevent any diplomatic efforts that people are trying to make today.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, which is that I certainly thought that, for example, Putin may have designs on Moldova, but the way that he would approach it would be by suggesting that Romania is somehow a threat to Moldova and that the Russians are going to protect the Moldovans from the West and from Romanian or European aggression. I guess the only question then becomes, is it fair or unfair to use a historical antecedent, which is Adolf Hitler's incursions into the Sudetenland and into Czechoslovakia, and being able to do that, and then the understanding from the European powers being, okay, that's it, but that really wasn't it, as we all know. Is it fair to say that there's similar antecedents, or not fair?
Well, people make this connection quite often, and it's, in fact, very popular to do that. I am very careful using history as a kind of explanation for current events, because I think that when we start directly comparing past to the present, we sort of we limit ourselves with the contemporary analysis, because we think, well, because it happened in 1939, it must be happening in 2025. Maybe yes, maybe no. But once again, what's the policy? So fine, you compare, you think it was with the cases. What is your policy? I'm sure you've covered already this. Kaja Kallas, the European Union diplomatic secretary, suggested that the 40 billions that Ukraine is going to get for European Union, guess what? Now it's, I think, 8 times less. I think it's 5 billion to now. These are all the countries that are screaming that Ukraine needs to be helped. So you're screaming or you're doing. And so once again, where is the policy? And when the policy is going to start matching the screaming words of this bellicose rhetoric, we cannot let Putin win. While it's happening, Putin thinks, you know what? You're all full of hubris. You're a hypocrite. You're hypocrites because you're not doing what you say you're doing. And in this way, he is winning.
Fantastic analysis as always. Nina Khrushcheva, always great to have you. Please come back and talk with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.